Chair Olcott, we are live.
Okay. Thanks, Em. Is everybody here? Okay, perfect. All right. So welcome, everybody. I would like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone to the hearing. The meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001. The procedures for the meeting are as per the town's procedural bylaw and the electronic meeting protocol during emergencies. I would like to now confirm that we do have quorum. In fact, everyone is in attendance. And I've confirmed that. So I do have a motion to adopt the agenda moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the Planning Committee agenda dated January 13th, 2021 be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that is carried. Perfect. I should say I'm doing this from home, you guys. So if there's a glitch, then you can blame me. At this point, I'd like to find out if there are any pecuniary interests, any members who have a pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. And we'll open with the portion that's a public meeting of this committee. I'd like to welcome everyone in the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or their representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and their mailing address. And please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Please also be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. And with that, we'll turn it over to Curtis Sibret, who is going to walk us through the first item, which is Z32 2020 HT 1350305 Ontario Limited. Over to you, Curtis.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee, and those members of the public with us here today. The subject property is located on Aspiden Road. The lot is designated rural and zoned rural 1 and natural resource. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen. There we are. Hopefully everybody can see that. The purpose and effect of the application is to rezone a portion of the lot from a rural 1 zone to a conservation zone to facilitate the creation of one new rural lot. I would also note for committee's benefit that this application is being processed concurrently with the consent application. The severed lands within that application are presently vacant, and would have an area of approximately 5.6 hectares with 150 meters of frontage on Aspiden Road. The retained lot is presently vacant also and would have an area of 34 hectares and no frontage on a publicly maintained road. And that can be seen here, so severed and retained. The lands are designated rural in the official plan, which anticipates single detached dwellings located on large lots that front on existing year-round maintained publicly owned roads, as well as conservation areas for expansive undeveloped lands and natural heritage features. The retained lands contain a large wetland that bisects the lot, and that can be seen sort of on the image in front of you, highlighted in green. To address the constraint, a wetland assessment was submitted by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., which identified portions of the lot as an open water wetland habitat and delineated the boundary of this feature on the severed lot. The report also included recommendations to impose a 30-meter vegetation buffer around the wetland, to limit vegetation removal outside of development envelopes, and to restrict tree removal between April 16th and October 14th to protect maternal roosting periods. And the wetland again is in green and blue, and the buffer is shown here in red. So the idea would be that the retained lands, the wetland and wetland buffer would all be rezoned to conservation. Staff have included recommendations to implement the conclusions of the wetland assessment through an agreement, which would again be through the consent on title of the lot, and to require that and obviously that application was also conditional on this rezoning being approved. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The District of Muskoka made a number of requests which would be implemented through the consent, and those included an agreement related to the location of wells in relation to the district road, as well as a road widening. One letter of objection had been received, raising concerns about safe access onto the lot from the district road. And I believe we have some pictures sort of showing the access point and showing the road in either direction. As a condition of the consent again, district staff have requested that written confirmation be provided from District Public Works that an entrance permit can be obtained on the severed lands. And the application appears to conform to the policies of the official plan and provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval.
Thank you for that, Curtis. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or their representative to provide any additional comments if they're available.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raised hand button or press *9 on their telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcott, I can see one hand raised. Please note that during the transition, your video panel will be momentarily interrupted. Once you've been added to the meeting, your video will appear in the committee member panel. Please have your microphone and video on if possible. Before you begin speaking, please confirm your name and mailing address.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Planning Committee. John P. Gallagher, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H1C9. I think Curtis has outlined the application perfect. The severance was approved by the Committee of Adjustment this morning, excuse me, with a number of conditions to be imposed on it. This is currently an existing lot that could have obtained a building permit on it. We pre-consulted with staff. Staff suggested that we obtain an environmental report to deal with the wetland and the evaluation and any recommendations coming of that. Riverstone was retained and placed in a buffer. And as you saw in Curtis's drawing, there was ample land left in the balance for the placement of a building septic. With regards to the entrance, the letter of objection, the person's driveway is a little bit further to the west. And so where their driveway enters, there is a blind hill. My client is proposing his driveway on the west boundary, which is right at the crest of the hill. And you saw in Curtis's photographs that we sent him that there's ample visibility both easterly and westerly. The wetland is a natural separation of the lots, and my client is taking all the balance, I think it's about 86 acres, and placing it into a conservation zoning, which will just allow it to exist as it is with no buildings or structures. We had no objection with the district comments that were submitted as part of the severance application. And we concur with the district and the town staff that the application does indeed meet the provincial policy, the district official plan, and the Huntsville official plan. I'd be glad to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm going to, does committee have any questions for John at this time? Or would you, I'll wait. If you don't mind, I'll hold off. And I would like to go to the public. If there are any members of the public who would like to address committee on this application, this is the time, I guess we should do that first.
So members of the public are reminded to use the raised hand button or press *9 on their telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcott, I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Thank you for that, Sam. That's great. So at this point, I would ask committee if there are any questions with respect to this application. Okay, so I do have, I apologize, I'm commenting out loud here. Again, I'm doing this from home. This is the first glitch. I printed out the motion, and the motion was moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. And it is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z32 2020 HTE, changing the zoning from a rural 1 zone to a conservation zone to permit creation of 1 new rural lot. Okay, and on our agenda, it had all of the list of conditional on. I'm assuming I don't need to read that, if I may ask. Kirsten?
Oh, may I answer that,
Sure.
Madam Chair? Through you, it was more of a technicality. Typically, we would write the report. If I could take a step back, staff have delegated authority typically to approve a consent where no objections have been received. So we would typically write the report to say, to recommend that Planning Committee make a decision on the zoning, and assuming that would be a positive recommendation, then that the Director of Development Services approve the consent. In this case, we got sort of a late objection, and so we thought we would just change the recommendation from the director to the Committee of Adjustment. So it wasn't how we would typically do it, and maybe it made it a little messy. I'm not sure, so I apologize. You don't need to read those.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thanks, Curtis. I appreciate that. It's just that what I printed out is different from what's on the agenda. So I didn't want it, whatever. So I've read the motion, unless anybody wants me to read it again. I don't think it's necessary. Questions or comments? All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. All right, thank you. We're back to you, Curtis, with the next item, which is Z33 2020 HT Williamson.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Again, I hope committee can see that. The subject property is located at 2493 Burnell Road. The lot is designated rural and zoned rural residential. The purpose and effect of this application is to rezone the lot from a rural residential zone to a rural residential zone with an exception to permit small engine repair, motor vehicle repair, and or a certification garage as additional permitted use on the lot, subject to provisions to limit the scope of that use. The subject lands are designated rural in the official plan, which does permit low-density industrial development where the adverse effects on surrounding uses can be minimized. In order to protect the rural character, the official plan includes design principles, including the retention of natural vegetation and overall low density of development and sufficient development setbacks from the road being provided to address noise and visual impacts. In this case, staff have recommended a number of provisions within the zoning exception to limit the number of vehicles associated with the use that can be on the property at any one time, to prohibit the storage of derelict or unplated vehicles outside of the garage, to limit the operation of the use to the person residing in the residence, to require the maintenance of a 1.5 meter vegetation buffer along the side lot lines, and to limit the number of employees who do not live, a number of employees who do not live in the dwelling to one, and the final exception being to limit the signage associated with the use to a 0.5 meter squared unlit sign. And as a result of these factors, it is anticipated that the proposed use will not adversely impact the rural character of the area in accordance with the official plan. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. No objections have been received. The application appears to conform to the policies of the town's official plan and provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval.
Thank you, Curtis. At this point, I would call upon the applicant or the applicant's representative to speak to this application if they'd like.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raised hand button or press *9 on their telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcott, I do see one hand raised. As a reminder, please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and confirm your name and mailing address.
Curtis, you're still sharing your screen with us. Did you want to do that, or?
No, my sincere apologies, Madam Chair.
Hey, I see Chris Williamson is with us.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody in our crazy world. What we are planning on doing there is moving my shop from Huntsville down to my son's place. I'm retiring and we're just going to take the small portion of a business down there. That's our reason for doing this. Is there any other question? Everything that I have read as well, I have agreed on as well. The number of cars, the signage, everything like that.
Okay, that's great, Chris. If you wouldn't mind just staying in the picture, because I'm going to ask if there's a member of the public who would like to speak to this application. And
Absolutely.
then, thanks.
Thank you.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raised hand button or press *9 on their telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcott, I see no hands raised.
Okay, thanks for that, Sam. And so I do have a motion, which I think Julie's going to put on the screen. Sorry, motion moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z33 2020 HT, changing the zoning from a rural residential zone to a rural residential zone with an exception to permit small engine repair, motor vehicle repair, and/or a certification garage as an additional permitted accessory uses, subject to the following provisions. No more than 3 vehicles associated with the use being located on the property at any time. Derelict or unplated vehicles may not be stored on the property outside the garage. A 1.5 meter vegetative buffer shall be maintained along all side yards that abut residential development. The use shall be conducted by a person or persons residing in the dwelling. A maximum of 1 employee who does not live in the dwelling may be employed on site. There shall be no display to indicate that any part of the property is being used for other than a residential use except for an unlit sign of not more than 0.5 meters squared. So with that, I'd ask, are there any questions or comments from committee? All right, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Okay, and that carries unanimously. Thanks very much for coming today, Chris. And there you go.
I appreciate it.
I'll be with you, and I believe that's it for our applications, our public applications. So now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. Rightio. So with that, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is site plan approval 98-2020 HT Mark Beadle Professional Services. And over to you, Curtis.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject property is located at 876 Spear Road. The lot is designated rural and zoned highway commercial with exception 0022. The applicant is proposing to develop the subject lands with a 170.9 meter squared steel structure to be used as a contractor's establishment. Although the proposed development largely meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw, a minor amendment to the site plan is required to identify the proposed parking locations on the lot. I mean, that said, it's going to be a somewhat large gravel pad in front of it, but still need it shown. Staff identified no concerns with the proposed landscaping, elevations, or lighting. It's a straightforward structure. The applicant isn't proposing a septic system or any outdoor lighting associated with the building. A stormwater management plan has been provided. Comments on the proposed stormwater management plan are forthcoming from the Ministry of Transportation and the town's operation department. Although some minor amendments to the site plan are required, just again, the parking, they are not anticipated to alter the site design as currently proposed. As such, staff are recommending that the approval of the application be made conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. The proposal for the site plan would appear to facilitate development that would conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. In view of the foregoing, staff are recommending approval.
Thank you for that, Curtis. At this point, before I ask committee if they have any questions, I am going to read the motion, which has been moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 98-2020 HT and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town. And further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. With that, I would ask if there are any questions from committee. Julie has just jumped in. So, Julie, did I do something wrong?
Madam Chair, I was just going to say that we may want to ask if there's any applicants or representatives that may want to speak.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Out of curiosity, this is all right. That's okay. Thanks.
Okay. The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raised hand button or press *9 on their telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcott, I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you for that. So I will remember that for the next two items as well. Sorry. Are there any questions from committee? Yes, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Curtis, I noticed that he had no lighting there. I guess he's not planning on having power on the site?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct, Councillor Fitzgerald. No lighting, no power.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that zoning, but I think it's a requirement of the Ontario Building Code that you have lights on entrance and exits to a building. So they just make note of that in the file, that he'll have to address the OBC with that one.
Thank you, and I will, through you, Madam Chair, I will, I usually have a follow-up with applicants who don't attend the meeting, so I will call him and I will just be sure that he has taken that into consideration. And obviously when he comes in for his building permit, our very diligent building inspector would catch that and notify him.
Okay, Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I'm just curious, around the pond, it looks, 100 by 150. Is there going to be a fence around that pond?
Curtis,
Or is
you're
it
on mute.
required?
Yeah, sorry, and through you, Madam Chair, the pond, 150, sorry, let me orientate myself here. Stormwater pond. There is no proposed fence and one isn't necessarily required. They're largely just, natural vegetation will just sort of be reestablished around it, and they'll clean out the sediment on occasion to maintain it in accordance with the stormwater management plan.
Is that satisfied, Councillor Armour?
I was just curious if it was going to be used for, for fire management also from a fire truck perspective, or I guess being in the location it's in, I think we have to worry about any small children or anything around that.
And thank you, through you, Madam Chair. It's in a somewhat isolated area. There are some homes on the street farther down Greer Road. Immediately to the south of this is another sort of industrial use, and there's no residential to the north. People largely use this section of road for walking or biking because it's nice and flat and straight. It's not going to be like a deep, it'll just be a fairly, shallow stormwater management pond on a secluded property set back from the road. So it should be reasonably safe. And in terms of the fire, you were talking about a fire pond. Just going to wait for final comment from our fire department and building department, just to make sure that that would be an acceptable course, or if the gentleman will have to place some underwater dry hydrants in the ground for water supplies. Hopefully that answers your question.
Does that answer your question,
sorry.
Councillor Armour? Okay, good. Are there any other questions regarding this application? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that carries. Thank you for that. Thank you, Curtis. I
Thank
think
you, Madam Chair.
you're okay. So with that, we're moving to agenda item SPA 116-2020 HT 2609-466 Ontario Inc. And over to you, Richard.
Chair Alcock,
Yes, Councillor Fitzgerald.
before we continue, I wanted to address the situation that my internet is unstable. So
Okay.
you may lose me.
All right, we hope we don't, though.
Sorry for the interruption.
You'd be sadly missed. I know. Well, Councillor Stone isn't so sure about that.
All right.
No, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to share my screen to talk about this agenda item. And I'm wondering if you can confirm that you can see that. I'll take it you can. So through you, Madam Chair, the subject property is located at 18 Legacy Lane. The lands have an approximate area of 1.8 hectares with no municipal road frontage. Access to the property is via an easement granting a right-of-way across a private road. The lands have been cleared of woody vegetation, but mature woodlands are still present around the perimeter of the site. The surrounding uses are residential, public open space, and commercial in nature. The lands are designated urban residential and are zoned residential 3 with a holding provision and a special exception 0249. The site plan application is for a proposed construction of a 33-unit bungalow townhouse development on the subject lands. A zoning bylaw amendment application was approved by Planning Committee in relation to these lands in August 2020. A bylaw was then passed to amend permitted uses on the lands to include the 33-unit townhouse development and the setbacks and general development layout shown on a property detail schedule. A holding provision was also imposed to ensure arrangements for access to the lands off Haynes Road are finalized and adequate provision of infrastructure and services are secured. The townhouse development will ultimately form part of a larger phased standard condominium development involving 46 Haynes Road, and access to the townhome units will be provided off Haynes Road across 46 Haynes Road and an intervening town-owned park block. To facilitate this driveway access, the intervening town-owned block is being transferred to the owner in exchange for lands on the western boundary of 46 Haynes Road. A condition is recommended to ensure this land transfer is completed at an appropriate time. Site plans, landscape plans, and lighting plans submitted in support of this development will require revisions to demonstrate zoning compliance and address OP policies pertaining to design criteria. However, these revisions are minor. Revisions should consider applicable setback requirements wherever necessary and parking provisions. Landscape plans should be revised to remove sod wherever possible and replace it with natural self-sustaining vegetation. A trail connecting to the property south towards Haynes Road is also recommended for inclusion where feasible. With respect to lighting plans, staff has requested that additional information be provided to verify that the exterior lighting fixtures are indeed full cutoff compliant. Technical studies were submitted in support of the development, including a traffic impact brief and a functional servicing report. The traffic impact brief looked at combined traffic impacts from development of both 18 Legacy Lane and 46 Haynes Road. And this study concluded that the cumulative impacts of additional residential units on both properties would not adversely impact the operation of the surrounding road network. The stormwater management report for the proposed development address was included in the functional servicing report, and it noted that the stormwater management for 18 Legacy Lane would be provided by an existing stormwater management facility to the north and east, which was constructed at the time the Muskoka Commerce Park development was constructed. Town operations staff requested that a peer review of the applicant's swim proposal be conducted, and this matter is still under review. Comments have been received from building relating to the site servicing plan submission requirements, and it was also noted that all drainage design must meet applicable town standards. Comments were also received from the District of Muskoka's Engineering and Public Works Department, who provided directions relating to connection to municipal water and sewer services. No other comments or objections have been received to date. This is the landscape plan, and it does show many trees are being proposed, but what what would be appropriate is where possible, some of the sod on lands abutting woodlands, mature woodlands, could be replaced as suggested with woody shrub or other tree vegetation. Here are some renderings of what the bungalow townhomes would look like, and some site photos for additional context. So the application appears, just going to stop sharing my screen. The application appears to conform to the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement, and staff are recommending approval of the site plan application subject to conditions to address outstanding matters noted in the report and any requested revisions from the relevant review agencies. You'll note that the applicant's agent responded to staff's report respecting this matter and requested an amendment to the condition pertaining to the access arrangements. This was documented in a letter, and essentially they're requesting a simple modification to the condition so that the milestone to state that the access arrangement be addressed prior to building, be amended to state that access arrangements be addressed prior to building permit instead of prior to site plan approval. And staff's reviewed that requested amendment and have no concerns. And I believe a process to amend the motion has been discussed with you, Chair Alcock. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that, Richard. I will ask, because I did the last time, so therefore, if the applicant or their representative is here, would like to speak to this application.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raised hand button or press *9 on their telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcott, I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Okay, thanks for that, Sam. All right, so I actually do have to what Richard alluded to. We had the original motion, which I'd like to read, and followed by a proposed amendment to that motion. So I'm going to read the first, which has been moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. You're still with us, Councillor Fitzgerald, so I'm going to keep that there. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 116 2020 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies, and 2, a land exchange between the town and owner as approved by council and described in report development 2021-07 being finalized to the satisfaction of the town. So that was the original motion. I am going to now move to the proposed amendment. And the amendment has been moved by Councillor Stone and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the following words be deleted. A land exchange between the town and owner as approved by council and described in report development 2021-07 being finalized to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the following words be inserted in its place. The site plan agreement include wording such that the land exchange between the town and owner as approved by council and described in report development 2021-07 be finalized to the satisfaction of the town prior to application of a building permit. So at this point, I would ask if there are any comments or questions from committee on that proposed amendment. Yes, Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just how are they, through you to Richard, I guess, how are they accessing the land right now, Richard, to do the site prep and everything? They're not accessing through Legacy Lane, are they?
It's my understanding that there is no site prep on 18 Legacy Lane at the moment. I do note I do understand that there are works on 46 Haynes, but that the works haven't moved through the town-owned block yet into 18 Legacy. Ultimately, if they wanted to do any site prep works on 18 Legacy, then they would have to finalize the arrangements for access before doing that, is my understanding.
Well, if I might, so the blasting that's going on up there is actually on 46 Haynes then, is that correct?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, that's my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. I just, so really what you're saying, Richard, you're confirming the fact that nothing will happen on that site via Legacy Lane. It will all be coming through Haynes as originally agreed to in the recent approval.
Yeah, that's right. And I believe the change that the proponent wanted to make with respect to this condition is simply to do with trying to commence on the sale of units. So they really do want to get a site plan approval so that they can begin marketing and selling or entering into agreements to purchase those units. So that's what they were trying to do. They weren't trying to get out of their obligation with respect to not accessing off Legacy Lane, just to be clear on that.
That's great. And it's confirmed that they actually can't do that with our approvals.
That's right.
Okay.
And
That's
there is also a holding provision in place that is extra belts and suspenders with respect to this matter too. So
okay, perfect.
mhm.
That's great. Thank you. Extra belts and suspenders too. I like
Oh.
that. Are there any other questions regarding the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, that's carried unanimously. So I will read the final motion, which has been moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 116/2020 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. And two, the site plan agreement include wording such that the land exchange between the town and owner as approved by council and described in Report Development 2021-07 be finalized to the satisfaction of the town prior to application of a building permit. With that, any comments, questions? All those in, oh, Councillor Stone.
Sorry.
No, no worries.
Just a quick one. It's quite a dense development, and I'm just wondering about snow plowing and snow storage. Has that been considered in the planning?
That's a good question. So thank you, through you, Madam Chair. These are all going to be private roads. So the town wouldn't be taking our equipment in there to do the snow clearing. It would be private contracted. There are the parking spaces that are shown on the plan, as well as driveways and the road network itself that would need clearing. So it's not a bad idea to raise that matter with them, because as we know up here, it's always good to plan on where you're going to put that snow, especially with emergency vehicles needing to pass through. So that is a very good question, and I'll take that up with them to try and address that matter.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. I have a very quick question. The proposed walking trail or connection to the larger walking trail, will that be going in at the same time as the development? Or is it, what is the timing on that?
So there's two things in that regard. There's a proposed walking trail to the east, connecting into the existing development there across an easement. So that would connect towards Legacy Lane, and that would be a pedestrian trail. So they are proposing to include that as part of their development. And what I was suggesting is that they should also consider connectivity to the south, towards Haynes Road.
Right.
So they are not currently proposing that. So that is something we would still have to discuss with them. And from what I've understand in our preliminary discussions on that, they do feel that maybe there's an ability to work with the town because of the land swap and the fact that this area that they're exchanging and giving to us is a north-south corridor along the western property boundary. So I think they're hoping to work with us and utilize that as opposed to bringing a trail through their development. So that I think I'd classify that as a matter that's up for discussion, but we'll push for and see what we can do.
Thank you for that response. I don't know about the rest of the committee, but from my perspective, I think we really need to push. Like, you know, we're constantly talking about connectivity and we want trails and so whatever is the best for both, you know, the applicant and for the town, happy to make that, you know, that work out. But I do think it's really important that it's a given. You know, this is a part of their development. They talk about it, but kind of gray. And what makes me nervous about gray is that it can fall by the wayside. It's happened elsewhere, and I personally don't want it to fall by the wayside. It should be right up front and center. You're proposing a new residential community, and part of that community, and what we've learned from COVID, is the importance, we already knew it, but even more so, the importance of being able to connect to trails, connect to walking places. Roads aren't a lot of fun to walk on. So to me, I feel like that should be really part and parcel. So I don't know where that fits with the approval and if that can be added, or I don't know. And I see that Mayor Terziano would like to jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't know if my memory is serving me well here or not, but when we did the land swap with them in order so that the town could have that extra piece to do a trail, we didn't negotiate them putting in a trail at that time or even contributing to our trail at that time. And I'm thinking, if that's the case, if my memory is correct, that's the time we should have been negotiating this. So I agree, anything we can do now, we still should, but I think we may have missed the boat on this one. Or maybe I'm not remembering it well.
Richard will certainly inform us of that. But I guess if they're putting in an access off Haynes to the development, what's wrong with a trail right beside that access? You know, is that okay? Richard, please.
Well, I see Kirsten's got her hand up, so I'll be happy to turn it over to her.
Okay.
But just on something Mayor Terziano said, I do remember that we had discussions about a trail at the time that we talked about this last in August. And I don't think we've missed the boat, but what I do think is that the complexity may be that I have to engage our Parks and Cemeteries group to see if that's something they want in that location at this time, or if that's something they'd like at a later date. So I can't say at this point without consulting them that that's their preferred location. It sounds like what we're hearing is that this committee would like us to pursue that though. So, and maybe Kirsten, if there's anything else you want to throw in, we're at the time where we can enter into agreements, right? So I'm wondering what you think about that, Kirsten.
Kirsten.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Richard is absolutely right. We can definitely investigate it further. The other thing I was thinking about was that this is only one step in the development process because the applicant will be trying to divide ownership, and it will go through a condominium application of some form or another. And we can also request parkland dedications through that process, which could perhaps take the form of a trail or contribute funds towards a trail if the town decides that they would like to have it constructed in a different location or nearby that development. So that was all I was going to mention.
So it's not too late. And so really what you need from committee today is there a general consensus that this is really important? And to continue to pursue that as, as ongoing work with respect to this particular application. And I don't know if you need a motion on that, or I've noticed a few nodding heads, but maybe there's a thumbs up and another nodding head. Oh, 2 thumbs up, 1 nodding head. Okay, and plus me, so that's 3 thumbs up and 1 nodding head. That's I think a majority of our committee. And you don't need a motion? Am I hearing that's okay? Kirsten?
Madam Chair, I don't believe we need a motion. We can, we've made note of it, and we have these meetings are taped now, so we'll always have reference, and it will be reflected in the minutes. So thank you.
Perfect. That's great. I appreciate that all. Thank you. All right. And I think that last chance about any questions or further comments with respect to this final motion. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you all for the work on that, and that's helpful. All right, and Richard, we are back to you with respect to the background information for an appeal of non-decision.
Great. I'm also going to share my screen for this one. And I'm wondering if you could confirm that you can see that.
Yes.
Great. So thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, this report is for information only. This report presents committee information about an appealed zoning bylaw amendment, which has been submitted to the town for lands located at 174 Earls Road, shown in red on my screen, on your screen. An appeal was filed with the local appeal tribunal, local planning appeal tribunal, or LPAT, pertains to this application on December 23rd, 2020, for the town's failure to make a decision on the application within 90 days of application receipt. This application was submitted to the town initially in February 2020, and the purpose and effect of this application was to rezone the lands to permit the development contemplated in a draft plan of subdivision application submitted to the district, which is referenced as file number S2019-8. The lands subject to this application have an approximate area of 40.1 hectares and an approximate frontage of 317 meters on Earls Road. The lands are currently vacant and are well vegetated, as you can see, with mixed forest cover and a large wetland feature. The wetland feature is approximately here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. The property is generally flat and slopes steeply along the eastern boundary. Drainage is generally overland flow towards headwater tributaries of Gypsy Bill Creek, and that's a cold water stream. And the property also contains seepages that contribute headwater flow to that feature. As can be seen, surrounding land uses include institutional, residential, golf course, recreational, rural residential, and planned development. The current official plan designation is urban residential, and the property is split zoned with residential 4 zoning along parts of Earls Road, residential 4 withholding provision on other parts along Earls Road, and rural 1 for the remainder of the property. The draft plan of subdivision proposal is for the creation of 287 single detached residential lots and 9 multiple residential blocks, each to contain a maximum of 72 units, for a total of 935 residential units. 3 blocks are proposed for stormwater management and parkland recreation purposes. Access is proposed via an internal public road network connecting to Earls Road. According to the applicant's planning justification report, this represents a 23.3 unit per hectare per gross hectare density, whereas 17 units per gross hectare is the average density target for new residential development in the official plan. The zoning, as seen here, there are 2 versions. Oh, sorry, I went too far. As seen here, there are 2 versions of the draft plan. The first represents the applicant's original submission, and the second is a revised submission received over the summer. The zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted to the town of Huntsville on February 27th, 2020 to seek a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the development contemplated in this draft plan. It includes higher density residential development along Earls Road and low density residential development to the north. The application was not considered complete at the time of initial circulation or submission, sorry, and it was not circulated for a public meeting as town staff was advised by the applicant's agent that it may require revision to address anticipated changes resulted from updated environmental fieldwork and analysis expected to occur later in the year. The rezoning application and the proposed draft plan was subsequently revised in September 2020 to reflect findings contained in an addendum to the environmental impact study completed in July 2020. The revisions proposed including the addition of a conservation block. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's along the eastern property boundary. And it was to contain sensitive natural features and associated buffers identified in the addendum to the EIS. As a consequence of this change, all other proposed zones were reduced in size, and the frontages for low density lots were reduced to 12.2 meters. These changes resulted in a loss of 2 single detached residential lots, slight modifications to internal roads, mainly here, and reductions to the area for multiple residential blocks abutting the conservation block. Unfortunately, prior to submission of these revisions, the applicant had initiated an appeal process on the draft plan of subdivision application based on the fact that there had not yet been a decision from the district respecting the matter. This subdivision appeal was filed on April 14th, 2020. So before they resubmitted these, they did these changes. As noted earlier, the applicant has also now appealed the zoning bylaw amendment application as of December 23rd, 2020. And this appeal was anticipated given the fact that the subdivision application had been appealed. The proposed initial and revised zoning bylaw schedules are shown here. The conservation zone is over the conservation block along the eastern property boundary. And you can see it right here. At the time of the initial rezoning application was submitted, it was determined that conducting peer reviews of supporting technical work would not be appropriate until additional environmental information and analysis was complete. However, the April 2020 subdivision appeal was filed in advance of this material being submitted. This implies that peer reviews of many of the supporting technical materials have not yet been complete. It should also be noted that many of the supporting technical materials were completed without the benefit of information and recommendations contained in the addendum to the environmental impact study. As a result, these materials would need to be reviewed and amended accordingly by their authors. From a natural constraint perspective, one outstanding concern relates to an identified 2.13 hectare wetland that was identified through the EIS addendum, but it was not recommended for protection. This recommendation would not be appropriate in consideration of other wetland protection policies contained in the town official plan. With respect to stormwater management and traffic impacts, studies were submitted to address OP policies, but were not peer reviewed, given the likelihood that they would change pending outcomes of the additional environmental work. The stormwater management proposal will need to be revised to address the findings of the environmental work relating to mitigation of impacts to seepage areas contributing headwater flows to tributaries of Gypsy Bill Creek. And the proposed stormwater management pond itself is located partially within the conservation block identified to maintain these features and functions. With respect to mitigating potential visual impacts of the multi-residential building block as required in the official plan policies relating to the control of building height and community character, staff had requested a visual impact study, and although one was submitted and contains a site plan with mature vegetation retention buffers and building orientations needed to mitigate visual impacts, none of these measures are reflected in either the subdivision block configuration or the proposed zoning. Housing mix, height, and density transition policies contained in the official plan were not appropriately considered in this application, either as design measures in place to control height of high and medium density development adjacent to low density development were not addressed. I don't know what I just said there. Basically what I was saying is that density and height transition policies in the official plan were not addressed. It should be noted that District of Muskoka Council, after being informed by staff of the details of the subdivision appeal in a report to the Community and Planning Service Committee staff report CPS 5/2023, adopted a resolution deeming that the development proposed in the draft plan of subdivision in its current form be deemed premature because it's not consistent with the provincial policy statement, does not conform to key policies in the Muskoka District official plan, and requires additional updated peer-reviewed supporting documentation. As committee may recall, staff report DEV 2019-187 in October 2019 recommended that a secondary plan be undertaken for the northeastern urban area surrounding the lands to ensure lands within the area be developed in a comprehensive manner and address the outstanding concerns noted by agencies through the pre-consultation process in relation to this application. The secondary plan study area was appended to that report. And in addition, an interim control bylaw was proposed to limit development for a period of 1 year while that study proceeded. It's noted that no secondary plan was required by the applicant in this instance, and no interim control bylaw was approved. Regarding next steps, the LPAT will convene a case management conference on January 14th, 2021, so tomorrow, to discuss the subdivision appeal. Given that the applicant just filed the zoning bylaw amendment appeal over the holidays, it may be that LPAT rules both matters should be addressed as part of a joint hearing process. An additional case management conference meeting will be needed to discuss the zoning bylaw appeal, and a multi-day hearing is anticipated. And I believe that's all I have. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll thank you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks very much, Richard. I just, before I ask committee about questions, so you did mention that the district did agree to have staff submit a report to the LPAT saying, here's why the application wasn't ready. There were all sorts of outstanding issues, and those issues have yet to be addressed. So that was the direction there. And I'm kind of hearing with what you're saying is committee should consider whether we might want to do a similar response or prepare a similar response that the district did, but in respect to the zoning. That's correct, right? That's sort of what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I think what we're doing for committee at this point is just providing the background, because there was no opportunity for a public meeting in relation to this. So really just giving you some of the background and notifying you that there was an appeal lodged over the holidays, and also that that there are some outstanding issues. So I was just really noting that district took that
done that. Right. Okay. Very helpful. Thank you. Councillor Stone.
So first of all, are we participating in any way in the LPAT meeting tomorrow?
Richard?
So thank you. Good question. Through you, Madam Chair. We have been in contact with the district's legal counsel, who are participating tomorrow, and we have advised them that we'd be interested in them attending for us, and we'll be asking them to report back to us on the information discussed. There has been discussions between legal counsel for the district and the appellant, and they believe that they will be discussing whether or not the applications should be dealt with together or not. And so we're anticipating that they will, but we don't imagine the case management conference tomorrow will get into any details, in light of the fact that these matters will probably be dealt with in a joint fashion at a later date.
Then as a follow-up, I would move that we have staff participate and create and basically be involved with the LPAT when it does come, or make at least a submission.
Thank you for that. Kirsten.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Normally, the municipalities and the appellants are parties to hearings, regardless of any initial participation. However, we will make note that with the case management conference tomorrow, because it is a district decision that was appealed, the town can be a party to it, but they wouldn't necessarily participate in the same fashion that we would for the zoning hearing, because the zoning is the town decision. However, we can definitely make our interest known in the subdivision case, and we will, we usually discuss these matters as to how the matters of appeals in a closed session, and I'm happy to do that at a future meeting. But at this instance, the subdivision case management conference is tomorrow. The zoning case management conference may not be scheduled for 2 or 3 months, for all we know, or longer. So it's just trying to make sure everything lines up together. But we will be bringing it back for discussion at a future meeting. Absolutely.
Can I follow up on that? So the idea of preparing a similar letter, which is what staff did in preparation from plan of subdivision appeal at the district, would it not be helpful for you to have a similar letter at this point from committee anyway, just to say, that council or committee of the town of Huntsville recognize that we have issues as well? Or is that premature to have that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's fine if committee chose to do some form of response to the appeal and in a sense and give the LPAT an idea as to what, if you'd had an opportunity to consider the application where you might have gone with it, that I don't think there's any problem if you were looking to do something today from that.
Which would just say that we have similar concerns. We have concerns, and those concerns were identified by Richard just now, that, you know, here are the reasons why we hadn't taken the application. We didn't take the application to committee because the application wasn't complete. And here are the things that were outstanding and we're still waiting for it. I would think that that would be an important thing to convey to both to LPAT and district. And I know you have, as you said, Richard, you have conveyed that to the district and they are well aware of it. But it would seem to me it would give it more weight if we actually had that on record from committee and council. Does that make sense? Or other committee members, any thought on that?
The only thing I would add, so the on-hearing, very similar presentation from district staff on the draft plan of subdivision appeal. That was the direction that district council, or sorry, your committee chose to take. And so it wouldn't be unprecedented. And I would assume the reason they took that position was just because they didn't get the opportunity to weigh in earlier, so they chose to take it. So
I can speak to that. I mean, our staff did brief us in preparation, just as Richard did, in preparation for the upcoming LPAT hearing. And they felt it was really important that we hear at committee, because we hadn't been given the opportunity, and that this is a big file, right? And so rather than committee be blindsided, or even council, that this is going through, and you know, that it was important for one committee to hear what the objections were from staff. And committee was very unanimous. We were unanimous on that, to say, I think it's really important that the LPAT hear why it wasn't just negligence. We didn't hear the application. There were a lot of issues with it. And the file wasn't complete. You know, it wasn't ready to bring forward to committee. And so we felt really strongly that the LPAT hear that and, you know, see it on writing, what, you know, and basically support staff in what they would be saying when they appear at LPAT. So I think we felt strongly that it was important to get that on the table. Yes, Mayor Teresiano.
Yeah, just for clarification, you're talking about the district planning committee here.
Yes,
right?
but I thought it was important to say why the district did, right? Because it's the same application. One's a plan of subdivision and one's zoning, right? So the issues are very similar, though, on what district staff were saying and what Richard is telling us.
But tomorrow's hearing is not on the zoning, correct? It's not
No.
on our piece.
Right,
Okay,
so the
I just-
timing and that, yeah.
And I think, as Kirsten said, this would be something that we would probably deal with further and closed.
I don't know why it would be closed, but maybe I don't get that. So, Kirsten?
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, the discussion regarding participating in the appeal and that aspect of it, we normally have in a closed session. However, if you're looking for some form of resolution today regarding the details of Richard's report, that would be something that could be done today.
Be open, yeah. And that's really what I was referring to, not the kind of participation we would be doing, but I was just thinking from a policy perspective, and that would seem to be okay to have a resolution on that. We do have anyway, maybe I'm hearing from Mayor Teresiano, you'd rather wait on this because you're seeing that it's somewhat mixed, or?
I'm just not comfortable doing a resolution today on this.
Okay.
That's,
Could I ask, just for my benefit, maybe I could ask Kirsten or Richard to just explain the difference between what we're talking, the resolution that might happen today versus what Mayor Terziano is referring to.
Madam Chair, I'll take a stab at it if I may. The District Planning Committee in, I believe it was August or September, passed a resolution that basically said that if they'd had an opportunity to consider the applications, they wouldn't necessarily have supported them because there was a whole list of outstanding items that still needed to be addressed in their opinion. So that was like an opinion resolution, I would say, sort of supporting the analysis that staff did through the staff report, but not discussing about participating in the appeal in any sense. And so Richard's report, a recommendation could be made that said, Town Council supports staff's analysis of the application and noting that there's items that are still outstanding that would need to be addressed before this application should be considered, or something along those lines. And that, I think, is where Chair Alcock is going, as compared to the discussion as to whether or not the town will participate in the future appeals, to what extent we'll participate with the LPAT moving forward. Does that clarify anything, or?
It explains it to me, but maybe, and I will ask Mayor Terziano if that is your understanding and you still are uncomfortable.
well, no, I get what Director Maxwell is talking about, what we do, but I'm just not sure why this committee needs to pass a resolution to say we support a staff report that we saw. It didn't come to us for a decision, right? We never got that chance. Have we ever passed a resolution before that just says we support staff's report that we didn't actually make a decision on? It just seems a little out of context.
I think what I'm hearing you say, that in fact we will, when the timing might not be exactly right, that when the LPAT, and presumably to what you're saying, Richard, is tomorrow when they deal with this, it's likely that they will want to combine the two together at a later date. And when they hopefully they make that decision, that when they do that, that might be the time for us to deal with what we want on the table for that. Does that make sense, Richard?
Yeah, I think that could work.
Okay.
I think definitely there's no rush on this. I think the idea was that because I think I've already said it, but because there was no application before committee or in the district instance, they did want to get their position out there, because when things do go to a hearing, sometimes some committees, not necessarily this committee, but some committees feel that their views are kind of not given weight, or their policies or positions might be circumvented by a tribunal situation, by a hearing situation. So I think in maybe the districts, and I don't know, Nancy, you can fill in the gaps, but some committees, some councils do like to provide a position just in the event that they're worried that their position isn't going to be given due consideration. So I think that's why some committees and councils do this, and I think that's why the district did it in their instance. But there is no rush.
No, as I think the timing, as you say, the LPAT is going to hear part of it starting tomorrow. So the timing, it was closer, but it was really important for all committee members. We really supported staff in this, and we wanted our views known, that the application is woefully lacking. And if you look at what Richard presented, they had the original application followed by, I think, a follow-up application, and they seem to be identical. So there had been lots of discussions back and forth between staff at the district and the applicant, and clearly there wasn't a lot of change. So that, I think it was really important for staff at the district to know that the committee was in support of what staff is saying. So I think from a policy perspective, a planning perspective, not on the kind of participation, but from a policy perspective, does committee support what our efforts in this? And so we absolutely did. So that's why it was important to get that on the table. But I hear what the mayor is saying, the timing here, maybe we don't have to at this point, but we probably do soon enough, right? By next month, we should take a position and have that discussion and move it forward in whatever direction that is. Is that acceptable from a staff position? Does that support or? Yeah.
There's no problem from a staff perspective whatsoever. No.
Okay. Rest of committee, I think I saw Councillor Armour's hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to speak that they're going to the LPAC tomorrow, and by the time we pass this resolution and get anywhere, they're going to already be there. So I think in principle they know we support it, and I think we need to just watch and see what happens tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So head nodding around the table on that approach. We'll leave any motion at this point. Okay, Councillor Stone and Councillor Armour, and we've lost Councillor Fitzgerald. I just noticed that. Oh. And Councillor Wiebe, I notice you're sort of nodding. So I think we've got that. All right, so we shall move on, and thank you for that update, and which takes us to new business. And I will ask if there is any new business from any member of committee. Yes, Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. So I wanted to bring up a bit of new business that relates to not just affordable housing, like another strategy for maybe affordable housing, but also in concert with the community, the planning permit that we are undertaking. And I'm going to just kind of put this out there as an idea that for committee to kind of give some consideration and basically ask if we want to further some of our consultations with our consultant that's taking place now about the planning permit. And that is, I've been giving a lot of thought to some of the strategies we have around affordable housing, and the more obvious ones are to simply allow developers to build many units to try and get them a certain number that are under that are attainable, or how we would define them, etc. But I was also contemplating the idea of allowing the use of some rural lands, owned rural lands, to be used in a way that would allow owners to construct dwellings, and whether that be a tiny home or a cob house or earth shed, whatever that may be. There are other alternative forms of houses that could be constructed by landowners that wouldn't necessarily fall within the parameters of the Ontario Building Code, but could be a good alternative in terms of housing. So I think there are a few municipalities that are contemplating this idea of what would be called an artisanal home, something that's constructed by the actual property owner. And there are some who can afford land. There are some families who have family land that could be used, but going the conventional way of building is simply unaffordable. So I'm wondering if it would be committee's appetite to consider a possible strategy, possible policy that would allow a landowner to construct a home that may not fit within the Ontario Building Code completely, but there would be a process of signing waivers. There'd be certainly a mechanism to not be allowed to sell such a dwelling. It would have to be removed. It wouldn't be transferable, for example. I surmise that there are plenty of people who just simply can't push all the way financially from land acquisition all the way through to all the requirements of modern builds and the minimum square footages, et cetera, that it becomes unaffordable. So I'm wondering if committee had any thoughts and if they would consider contemplating engaging our consultants in concert with the planning permit to try and explore another option for this type of policy within our with our municipality. So any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear them, and hopefully I've explained it well enough.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wiebe. Sure, Councillor Stone.
So I'm intrigued. You know, the thought of tiny homes and how that might work. If that's one of the examples, I would like it fleshed out a little bit more for me. What are the ramifications? Obviously, there's health and safety issues, water and sewage, all these things. So obviously, building would need to be involved. I would like someone to bring me back here's some possibilities that we might be able to change some of our laws to allow this to happen. But I need something to work with first.
Thank you for that. And I think what I'm hearing you say, Councillor Wiebe, is saying that is this something the committee has appetite to add to the work that our consultant, community permit planning consultant, is doing as they're reviewing zoning. So is this something that they could do a bit more on the area of how to make building in our rural areas more flexible? Maybe there are examples out there of other municipalities who have already attempted that. And if we could add this to the consultant list, if that's what you're saying, I certainly support that, because we certainly have a demand out there, for example, on something like tiny homes in the rural area. So if there's a way this can be done that meets the needs that we have and meets their needs, then I personally, I think that certainly has a lot of merit. And I know that Mayor Terziano had her hand up, and so did Councillor Armour. So Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting idea. But somewhat like Councillor Stone says, it's got more questions than answers to it already. And my concern with putting this into our community permit consultant's hand is we're going to slow down a process that we've already tried to speed up and get done in less time than most of them are done. And the last thing I want to do is put something on them that's going to stop that. And I think my question would be to Kirsten is if we did want to get these questions answered and things, can we not do our community permit, see it through, and still make adjustments to it once it's in place? I'm not saying I would throw the idea out. I'm just saying that to me, it's like an octopus. It's got about 8 questions right off the bat that we need answers to, some of them from building, some of them from planning, some of them from, and it also sounds like we're talking about a tiny home and some other kind of a home and some kind of property and another kind of property, and maybe we got joint properties. There's just so many questions that I don't want to slow down our community permit.
Okay, thank you for that. I will ask Kirsten to respond to see what the best, if there was some support for doing all of that research and carrying on, what might be the best route to do that. So Kirsten, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To address the standards that we would want to see for rural development, if we were talking about something like minimum house size or maximum house size, those sorts of standards could, I think, quite effectively be incorporated into the community planning permit process that we're working through. However, when we look at alternative forms of housing and the building code implications and then policy implications further on, and tenure and ownership options, that might be a bit too extensive for the scope of what we're doing right now and might cause some hiccups along the way, but we are willing to try and work out anything that committee wants to do in that perspective.
So just, so it sounds like part of it can be looked at through the community planning permit. But the more extensive list of questions is sort of a separate item. And I guess I would ask Councillor Wiebe where you'd like to go with that, if you'd like committee to support, you know, taking this up as an aside, a different issue that staff can deal with at a later date, or I'm not sure. So I asked Councillor Wiebe.
I would, I guess at this stage of the game, I think that I would, I'd be happy if we, as a committee, could agree that maybe looking at more alternatives would be valuable. And if we can, as a committee, agree on that, you know, looking at other strategies to find affordable solutions is kind of a baseline to start with. I recognize obviously that there are implications in terms of water, septic, or are we going to allow compost toilets, or do we need to adjust our setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. There are plenty of policy issues around that. But I think as far as today's discussion, it would be nice to move forward knowing that committee agrees we'd like to at least do some research, and I'm more than happy to be the lead on that. I would love to, I've already done a lot of research on it, and I'd love to continue to do some work on that. But as a committee to say, yes, we want to explore it, and we're not necessarily going to dedicate an extraordinary amount of resources towards it just yet, but I think there's some questions and some exploration that's warranted, and that we're open to it. So I'd like to see us move forward on make some sort of progress forward, and see if we can answer a few questions, and who knows, maybe come up with a few potential strategies that could make a difference in the community.
Well, I can speak for myself. I absolutely support the idea. I go with as you generally say, that in concept and principle, the idea of looking at alternative ways to provide more alternative and affordable housing, looking at our rural areas, is a very good thing. I know at the task force, Districts Housing Task Force, one of the subcommittees, the 4, deals with alternative housing and alternative ways to get there. And there is a group of people who would love to be able to build tiny homes. So, and there are issues with that. So I know there's a lot of support for that. I know there's a lot of support for that in our community in Huntsville, but it hasn't been explored to the extent that it needs to be. So I would certainly support the first step of supporting the concept of doing more work on it. Absolutely. You have my support. Councillor Stone.
Yeah, once again, I'm intrigued. Is there another municipality out there in North America that has done it? And can we get them to Zoom in on a meeting and tell us where the hiccups are? I'd like to hear from them.
I can tell Councillor Stone that there are lots of tiny home communities outside of the city limits in North America. I've visited one of them outside of Austin, Texas. Fantastic community. They do have water services, but they also use septic. So, you know, I was looking at other places, and I know there are several communities in Georgia, you know, so yes, there are other communities. So Councillor Wiebe, I think you wanted to respond to Councillor Stone.
Yeah, if I could sort of make a final summation and just say that when we really start to investigate this issue, and we really start to look into what's happening out there in the world, we will find out that people are craving the opportunity for something different. I think that it's too easy for us to assume that everyone wants the same type of housing, but it's not true. And there are people that are very resilient and very creative, and are finding ways to thrive and not spend the bulk of their earnings just on housing. So I think it's worth looking at. I think us as a municipality, if us as staff, as committee members, if we're given a little bit of room to do some exploration, I think we'd come back with some pretty intriguing findings, and I'd be really excited to push this forward a bit.
Are there any other comments from other committee members with support for moving this forward, not, notionally? Mayor Terziano?
Yeah, just to be clear, I fully support the idea of figuring out a way to do things better. But what I really love is Councillor Weeb's idea that he's going to do some more exploration and find the answers to a lot of questions, and maybe find out some places that we may not have to reinvent the wheel. We may just have to do some copy and pasting. And I think that's great. And I think the more info you bring back to us, the better we'll be.
Perfect. I'd be happy to do some work as well, Councillor Weeb. So if I can join your committee. Okay. Is that?
I don't know that a resolution, sorry. I don't know that
Nope.
resolution may be needed at this stage. I know I discussed it briefly with Director Maxwell, but I'm happy to leave company today, knowing that this committee would be interested in seeing where else we could go with it, and I'd be happy to take on some of that work.
Okay, great. I think you've got most of us saying, go forth and conquer. Is that adequate? Okay. All right, terrific. Thank you for raising that. That's really wonderful. And I'm appreciative of your interest and your work on that. Thanks, Councillor Weeb. Okay, so any other new business? Seeing none, we're going to move to our last item. Is Richard's going to give us a quick update on the community planning permit process.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. You may recall that last month we had a presentation on a report that our consulting team had developed called the Background and Directions Report. So an update for you on where we sit now is that report has now been finalized. If you remember, there were some interviews that were still happening with other jurisdictions. That information is now contained in the report, and a copy of that final report is on the myhuntsville.ca webpage. Also, a newsletter was sent out in December, just before the holidays, so I think it was the 21st, to various stakeholders throughout Huntsville to identify that this report is now available and that they can review it and look at the directions that we could go with the community planning permit system, and to inform them that throughout January and February in the new year that we would be doing stakeholder consultation. So on that front, a meeting is scheduled for next week, Wednesday, and invites have been submitted to the initial recipients of that newsletter, and as well as we've posted a news update on Engagement HQ indicating that if anyone knows anyone who may have an interest in the project, that they can reach out to us to also attend if they so choose. So again, that's next week, and information is available on Engagement HQ, or sorry, myhuntsville.ca. The final update is that once we have this meeting, this workshop next week, we'll get some initial feedback on some discussion points that we'll be presenting, but we'll also be inviting our participants to participate in a survey to get more fulsome feedback on the community planning permit system and the information that we've presented to them. So a survey would follow. So that's kind of, I think that's all I have to update you on right now. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Richard. Are there any questions of Richard at this point? I'm curious, do you know if has there been some support out in the community for next week's meeting, or do you have a sense of any feedback on that?
Yeah, so the initial, I mean, the responses are coming in. I think we've got about 20 people who have indicated an interest. So,
Good.
and I don't really have any, I couldn't really report on who they are or what, from
All
what
right.
areas they're coming from, but there were about 20 people.
Okay, that's great. If you had said that, Richard, and I missed it, I apologize, but
I
thanks.
did not say that.
Okay, all right, good. I was just figuring. All right, so I don't see any other questions of Richard, and thank you for your ongoing work on that. That's brilliant.
Okay.
All right, so with that, I do have a motion moved by, I think we're at the end of our meeting. So a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Armour. It is recommended that we do hereby adjourn at 2:40 p.m. All those in favor? Carried and unanimously, with the exception of Councillor Fitzgerald. There we go. Thanks, everybody.